Check out this little reading nook in a little attic with this comfy chair. So we're going to learn how to do this detail and texture and kind of getting some of those architectural elements in a kind of freestyle. So here's two colorways that I have, and so we'll create something together. So get your supplies and we'll get started. So the first thing that I did in creating my versions was to just start with a pillow. So I'm today going to use more of this kind of purpley raspberry color for the flowers. I'm just kind of applying a little bit of paint and water at the end of my brush just to start getting the first layer of these flowers. I'll go back in and add another layer so it'll absorb right there into the paper. And in this motif, if you've got this through my store or tamery.com, you can really kind of make flowers out of the leaves or leaves out of the flowers. It's up to you because they're sort of nondescript. So actually, I think I'll make this into a flower and maybe over here to kind of center my pattern or to have more of a cohesive look. And so I want that to really dry, and then I'll pop in some more details in a bit. Okay, and so now I will come over here and work a little bit on this plant. Doing the same thing. I'm just depositing some of these minerals, the paint into here, and you can see I'm kind of dabbing in. Some is a little bit more and less, and that's going to be a darker or lighter version of that same color of green. And there's some trailing leaves right there. And the next thing we'll do is we'll work on this blanket, and you can pick whatever color you want. If you want it to be beige, you want to kind of pick your chair. I have one kind of beige chair, one kind of gray chair. So I'm going to leave the chair a little more white and pick more of a grayish color for this blanket. So what I'm going to do is find some of these lines in this cable knit blanket here. I've got mine here in my setup for my cottage core theme. So we know that knitting and doing fun hobbies is kind of popular right now. So I found some motifs that fit that type of style. This photograph that I sketched from as a reference, you can kind of see I'm finding some places more of the outlines to sort of start from. We'll go in and start to fill in some of these places with more or less paint. And like I said before, we're just kind of depositing some of those minerals from the very tip of our brush. I call it kind of dancing our brush or dappling. And all that does is it will end up leaving a bit of a deposit, like you can see here where you've got that fun little outside, what I call like a crispy edge. Where the minerals kind of deposit, sort of like after a rain on our greenway, the sand from the kind of creek area flows up with the water recedes and evaporates, and then you're left with some sand along the path. And that's the same kind of concept you'll see with watercolor. Now that's a little bit darker than I wanted. I don't want it to look so brown. So you can see I just kind of stamped that back. That's a good start on this blanket. And I'll come back in after that sets up. And by that I mean it kind of dries a little bit. And that way we can add the next layer and this paint will kind of stay where I put it. So I'm going to now move to the pillow and just dab in a little bit of the green for these leaves in this pattern. Like so. And I am using the very finest tip on here. If you do not have a water brush like this, or a kind of stiffer small brush at home, you probably want to get one if you're going to do these cottage core. You might be very frustrated trying to get in there and not really kind of overdo the shapes there because the size is just too big. Okay, I'm putting some darker green up in here, but you see, I'm not going around each one specifically. I'm just kind of generally popping in a little bit of green. For this one, I'm picking just a nice wood color here, and it's got this narrow base that we see peeking here and down here, which means that this is part of my blanket, so I'm going to go ahead and get that with the blanket color. And we'll let that set up. You may want to wait till that dries to stick that in there for now. And because I want to do a white chair, I'm going to use the gray to do the accents on my chair. And I can test out that gray, and that way I'm really basically only painting shadows because the fabric is white, the window is over here. So it's kind of a cozy little area, and even though the window's over there, we've got some little shadows created in the wrinkles of the fabric, kind of going over those lines so they're not as visible or noticeable, although it's fine to see the lines in watercolor. You can choose to paint watercolor with no drawn lines. I don't know why anyone would want to make it so hard for themselves to do, but that takes a lot of effort and talent and practice, and I basically doing this for fun, so I'm not here to frustrate myself, if you know what I mean. Okay, I just kind of dab that back because I put too much in there. And this right here is a shadow. Starting to come together there. That is just kind of bleeding over. We'll let that be a little more shaded on that piece. I have a clear brush, just kind of spread it around so it won't be quite as bright white. If you want bright white, then you can see how I just had it white, and you can just leave it that way. It'll still look white at the end, but I'm going to use this same kind of wood color that I used on that stand, and I'm leaving white of the paper, especially toward the middle of those legs to make it look like they are round. A bit more of this paint and go back over this table because it's soaked in. I'm going to move over to this table here, and I believe I used this redwood and foxberry from this set to get a nice wood color. Maybe I had a little bit of brown in there. Doesn't have to match exactly, as we've got a couple different woods over time, collected different pieces of furniture. So draw that in so it matches. Should be there if you've got a take and paint. And if you drew your own little cottage drawing, then you're just following along to kind of see how I'm making those choices. I think when you paint in an area like that and you don't just go across the whole thing, you get these variations of tones, some places for the water to recede and leave a little bit of texture, and that's just going to kind of go off the edge of the page where our frame would go. And it's really soaking up into the paper, so I'm going around that again one more time while I'm here. Now I'm going to paint this lamp. I'm going to make kind of a gold color, kind of fancy. Get the same color I've got for my flowers and my pillow, so that's coordinated. And you can see how I left the white of the paper there, depositing a little more color. And I can go and just tap a little bit in there. So I think I like it where the floor is kind of more of a natural wood, kind of like a white oak. And you can add a little bit of gray to that. Got a few light lines here just to kind of show you where the shadow for the chair might go. But we're just going around, mixing a little bit of that gray and sand ridge to get that first coat of the floor. We'll add the shadow and some of those details in the floor in a minute and let that just dry. So we can go back over to our plant here. And you can see I'm moving all around my page because I'm letting areas dry for that detail. So that's if you're kind of working on line drawings and you're not sure why it just kind of blends together. It might be because you're working a whole area start to finish and it's still too wet. And it won't give that layered look, like even up here in the shade. It's still a little tacky, but I can come across here, and tacky meaning it's not dry and it's not wet or soaking wet. Okay, same with this table. Get those legs, get another layer going. So I'm using so little bits of water, that's why I can so quickly come back over this. But if yours is still wet, you can add another layer unless you've got another tone you're putting in here, then you'd want to wait. Even go over it and kind of add a little bit of brown on top of, I've got that kind of reddish tone, and sort of give it another different shade of wood, but also maybe a little bit of a shadow, like maybe the top of this isn't really a shadow, it's just it's been used, so it's more worn in and the finish has more of a depth to it. Come in here and follow these lines for that shadow. I didn't draw the lines in here, under here for that shadow, but there would be under that table. And I must have added like a brown and black together for that. Right here at this corner, you'd see more of a shadow. And now if that's dry, you can add a little bit of these. That's still not, I just painted that, so it's wet. Just adding a little bit into this color and make it darker. And we'll add the lines in a minute. See, it's starting to get some depth now, filling in a little bit of those areas without trying to get the paint from that out of the line there. So I just scrubbed at it with a clear brush and dab that away. I'm going to grab my examples again so you can see them. The books kind of go with the theme. This was a little bit more of a fall theme, more oranges. This is more red, deeper green. So I'm going to do a combination of something of that. And you can see that floor is more of an orangey color, so you may like that as your wood on your floor. If you are doing that, then I would make sure this wood doesn't disappear and has some contrast to it. Okay, so of my books, I'm going to start doing a few of the blues. I'm going to start here, and I'm not going to go every other one, but I'm going to skip a few. Sure I have enough paint with that same color, and I think I'll do these two in a blue. And now I'm going to take this blue here and sort of deposit that so that they're not all exactly the same. Maybe I'll put a little bit of gray on top just to tone it down. Okay, and get these corners. Trying to work around my microphone here, so forgive me, those weren't quite as crisp lines. All right, now I will go and do a few yellow. I guess if that's gold, then these are golden books. Pretty fabulous. All right, now that's the same color as the wood, so I'm going to go and just add a little bit of gray right on top of that, or you could just mix something over to the side so that it is not the same color as everything else in your picture there. Let's check that out. That's really dark, okay? It's a little different than what we have with the leaves down there, so that's good. Family could come in and hang out in this little place and really enjoy taking it easy. All right. I'm going to get these look like they're put in backwards, so I'm going to go and put that in, and because that's right next to it, I'm going to, let's see, maybe I'll do that blue on top of that color. I'm going to make it green. That way I don't have too much of the same thing right next to one another. And get that. There, nice set of books. So let that dry and I'll work on these teacups. I've got my teacup here that I got from my grandmother, so I'll kind of model my teacup after this and put a little bit of this nice little green detail on here. And this looks like it's from a different kind of set, but it will go well with it. And actually, I'm going to act like there's little flowers on here. So small, so you really can't get in there too great, but you can always try. And I'll paint that a little bit of a off-white color. All right, now our floor down here has dried quite a bit. So I'm taking some brown and kind of following those lines a little bit. Make sure you've got a nice little thin line you can add in more elements that look like wood. Very faint line of black. If it's too dark, it'll overwhelm the picture and it'll distract you from all the cool stuff you actually want to see. This is just supposed to be an accent. And I might be missing a line in here somewhere, so I'll put that back in. Pulling the line toward yourself is the best way to do it straight. But you do not want to do that and have any of this wet, so you just have to be careful. Wet paint in there. So you just clear your brush, scrub at that a little bit, dab it with your paper towel. Kind of come in here like we did with the plant and paint those in, and if you want to add, other than green, a flower in here or something with a color, then there's lots of little circles you can fill in with a color and it'll look like there's flowers. And I'll do this, whatever that is a picture of. And I can just kind of loosen the paint from these lines. I just use a clear brush. And that'll give me just a baby wash. This can be darker under here because it's underneath and behind this chair. So the wall should be a little bit darker as a shadow around all of that. And probably kind of along here. I'll do a little bit darker under there. And I think we'll just kind of grab a little bit of darker color for a couple of these areas that would be in the shadow, like especially underneath this pillow. Make it look like it's tucked under there. Maybe a few places on this arm to just go over the edge of that blanket. You can see I'm just kind of dot dashing it in a way. Give that kind of cable look. And I'm kind of going over where I've already painted. That way the blanket will still look like it's a light color, but we're adding more dimension. If you fill the rest in, it'll start to kind of look like the blanket is now that solid color. And just adding a little bit of dark just to get that contrast. Get the back of that like there a little bit. And maybe just add a little more shade and shadow to the back wall. And I'm leaving the attic ceiling a white color, but the wall here will be that same kind of gray. Well, I said there was a window there, so you can either add that in or just leave it as a wall. And we're almost finished. We're just going to come in here with a little bit of shadow, and you can use more or less. And it's good to kind of get under the bookshelf here. It'll look more realistic and dimensional that way, of course. kind of doing narrow up there and a little wider as I go. So it looks like the lights come in that direction. Just gonna add a little bit of an accent there just to define that. I don't want to go around everything. I'm gonna kind of go around that medallion. Well, you can go on and on and on doing shadows here, but I'm going to stop here because I absolutely love this and would completely want to frame this. So enjoy painting, and remember to tag me on Instagram too with your final piece. And I'm realizing I forgot to do the rug right here, so let's do that. I'm going to take some of the hints from the pillow color and just kind of fill that in here and do maybe a little bit of green. Just kind of an impression of a rug. Most of that will go in a frame underneath. So I almost missed it, but there. Now I'm finished.